Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
How well do you understand the inner workings of your business? Do you know what your front desk does? Not the big picture, but the specific things they actually do on a day-to-day basis. Are you familiar with how your software works and can you use it? Do you know how to fill your schedule, handle recall, file insurance? You know, the basic business processes in your practice. If you're like many of your colleagues, you have some idea about it, but you don't know it all that well. And look, I understand. That's why we hire people to do these things. But knowing how these things work and actually doing them are not one and the same. And of course, I wouldn't expect you to do things that you've hired employees to do. If you're verifying insurance benefits while at the same time employing a financial coordinator, something is very wrong. But whether you have someone that does this or not, I would still absolutely expect you to know how to do it and everything else in your business for that matter for a number of reasons. By not knowing how everything in your business works, you put yourself at a severe disadvantage. And worst case scenario, this method of operating can leave you petrified about firing a team member that really needs to go because you have no clue how their job works. And that's what I want to talk about on this week's episode of Dental Business RX, the importance of understanding your basic business processes. My name is Jeff Bloomberg and I'm your host. And you may have listened to that intro and thought, well, I'm a doctor. Why would I need to know this stuff? That's why I hired good people, smart people who know how to do it. Hire smart people and let them get on with it. And I get to focus on clinical. And sure, I get it. But again, knowing how something works and then actually doing it are not the same thing. And when it comes to your office, it's truly a case of what you don't know can absolutely hurt you. And to be clear, I'm not talking about management, skill in management, hiring, organizational strategies, increasing efficiency, growth strategies, etc. That is a separate skill set that you should absolutely have as a business owner. What I'm referring to in this episode is more the day-to-day functions that make your office work. And there is some truth in that. If you have a lack of understanding of these day-to-day functions, you are going to run into some trouble with management. Specifically, if you don't understand what's happening in your office and what's involved and how things are done, then 5 basic things can happen to you. Number 1, you won't know if what a person is doing is actually what's needed, helpful, or should even be happening in the first place. Tell you a story. Now, you may or may not be familiar with the position of PR director. You may have had one in your practice, maybe you haven't. Obviously, your PR director is responsible for getting new patients. Well, years back, I remember talking to a couple of clients and they'd hired a PR director and I asked, how's this PR director doing? They hadn't been to MGE for training yet. They said, well, we think she's doing okay. Okay, you think she's doing okay? Well, what does she do every day? Well, I don't know. She sits in an office and she's working on mailing lists, which, I don't know why they would work on mailing lists, but she wasn't getting more new patients. When we looked at their new patient statistics, it had not increased. So they have this PR director, and the whole purpose you'd hire a PR director for would be to get more new patients, and they weren't getting more new patients. Yet they couldn't determine whether she was doing a good or bad job yet, and she was working on mailing lists because they didn't understand themselves what a PR director should be doing or what their objective is. And that's something that's, in a lot of cases, if you're having a hard time determining, is this person doing a good or a bad job? Well, take a look at what you hired them for. If you have a schedule coordinator, why would you hire a schedule coordinator? Well, you want a more productive, more efficiently run, more properly scheduled schedule. You want patients showing up when they should. If you have primary time blocked out in the morning where you're doing larger procedures, you should have patients in those primary time slots. It shouldn't be empty. If that's why you hired the person, and assuming you've given them the basics on how to do their job, then you would expect to see those things actually occurring in the real world. If you hire a schedule coordinator and your schedule's more empty and you're less productive, then what was the point of having one? You were better off before you didn't have one. So lack of this understanding of what should be going on with a position will put you in that position where you don't know if what they're doing is needed, helpful, or what should be happening. The next thing that can happen to you is you won't understand whether the person is taking too long to get something done or by extension not really doing as much as they could, or maybe they're doing more than they should if you don't understand their job. You could ask someone to estimate, if you don't understand, for example, verifying benefits. Well, that could be, it doesn't have to take long, but it takes longer than 30 seconds, right? Even though, depending on the benefit plan, you might have it where you still have to use fax machines, which is still amazing because you have to love insurance companies. But let's say you don't understand benefit verification. You ask somebody to verify benefits and 30 seconds later, it's not done. Well, it takes longer than that. If you don't understand that, then you're going to have problems. Or let's say you have openings in your hygiene schedule. Openings in the hygiene schedule. So you ask to have those filled, and whoever's handling your hygiene schedule tells you that it took them all day to fill 2 openings. Well, that's too long. But if you don't understand how the job works, how do you know if it's too short or too long, or if they're inefficient or efficient? And this also opens the door to the proverbial excuses. It's the summertime, right? So things are slow right now because people are on vacation. And, also, patients have a hard time paying in December or January because of the holidays, or in April because of tax season. These are the things that we hear all the time. Well, who's telling you these things? It might be a staff member. It doesn't make this staff member a bad person, mind you. Okay, it really doesn't. It means that maybe they have a problem. They can't figure out how to collect the money they're supposed to collect. And 1 or 2 patients mention that to them, and boom, they latch right onto that. Okay, that excuse is going to work, but then you're buying it as well. You may have tried to organize your schedule where you're doing highly productive procedures in the morning. We call that primary time, right? And you can't seem to fill the mornings. So you find out what's going on. Why can't I fill these mornings? Well, doctor, a lot of patients don't want to come in the morning because they're working. Okay, well then you hear that enough, you start to think that that's a fact as opposed to what one person is telling you. Look, I've seen it so many times where one person says it's hard to schedule people in the morning, and then the next person just schedules them. I've also seen it where there are full hygiene schedules during the summertime when everybody's on vacation, and highest ever collections in December, January, and April. So if something's not working for someone, they're going to have to come. It's very uncomfortable to have something not working out, right? If I'm supposed to be collecting money and I'm not collecting money, I'm looking for a reason. Why am I not collecting money? Well, if someone gives me an excuse like that, that works out really well. And maybe that explains it for me. Unfortunately, that excuse doesn't help me collect more money or fill the schedule, you see? So it's very easy to buy those excuses if you don't really understand how the job works. I saw this happen with a client where this was years and years ago, but they had hired somebody to do reactivation, and this person's calling various people to reactivate them, get back in the practice. And the doctor hears how all these patients are leaving the practice, just tons in droves. So the doctor starts freaking out a little bit. What are they doing wrong? Why is this happening to them? So I told the doc, why don't you get on the phone and call a few of these reactivation patients yourself? And she was funny. Really? Me personally? Yeah. Why don't you personally call a few and get your own understanding of what's really going on? So she got on the phone and she scheduled a bunch of people. The problem was the person calling, in this case, was not a great team member, but you could have somebody who just doesn't know how to schedule and thinking that this is just the way it is. In this case, the doctor found out it was not near as difficult as it had been being made out to be. And that's something I'd recommend. If you're hitting a situation where you have some unsolvable problem or something that you think should be able to be done, but you're not quite sure, try it yourself. And you may go, well, gee, that is going to hurt my production per hour. I mean, don't do it during office hours, but carve out a little bit of time and try it yourself. Having trouble filling a hygiene opening? Try and fill one yourself. Find out for yourself how long it takes to verify benefits. Get some understanding of these things, and then you'll start to have a better understanding of your office. Third thing that can happen to you if you don't understand how these jobs work or what actually goes on is it can hurt you as a leader. One of the basic tenets of leadership is you don't ask people to do things that you yourself would not do. All right. You could extend that a little bit in that if you wouldn't ask somebody to do something that you thought was truly impossible. If I thought something was completely unattainable, and I couldn't attain it, I wouldn't ask them to try to attain it. It's just, to me, it's bad form. So if you don't understand how specific things work in your practice at the front desk or at the various positions in the office, you're going to set goals or targets for the office, which are going to be a bit unreal. You might think it's really easy to go from doing 80,000 one month to 200 the next. You probably don't because you're the one producing a lot of it. But let's say you did. So you tell the team we did 80 last month. Good. Let's do 200 next month. that just may be a bit disconnected. It's too much, too fast, right? Or let's say you have to cancel a day on the schedule because you're unexpectedly going to be out of town. So you tell the front desk to cancel the day, and then you come back a half hour later and you ask why everybody isn't rescheduled yet. Well, maybe it takes longer than that. You have to understand what it really takes. And the last two things is, if you don't understand what's going on in your office, is you'll be easily fooled. You'll have difficulty seeing if something is wrong if you don't have any understanding. And this happened to me once in kind of a silly way. You can kind of figure out how this would work in your practice. But years back, this was almost 20 years ago, I was having custom software made for the company. Now, the horrible thing about custom software is it's sort of like building a house, and they build the entire guts of the house, and then all of a sudden you end up with the siding on the house, and then it looks like a house. Prior to that, it doesn't look like anything. It just looks like this big concrete block. So they're making the software, and they could have told me anything. How's it going? Well, we have to, add something to the flux capacitor, and I would have believed them. I understand the basics of computers, but I have no idea about writing code. So they could have told me all kinds of stuff, and I would have had no idea what they were talking about. So I had to work out a different method of managing the process because I was so in the dark about what they were doing. I had to understand at least some of the basics and then have certain benchmarks I could push for. Otherwise, they could have fooled me continually. And the last thing is if you don't really understand how things in your office work and the basic business processes, is you'll have no clue as to whether you are over or understaffed. Now, that's a question we hear quite often from newer clients. Do you think I have too few or too many staff? Why are we able to answer that question without actually being physically on site in your practice, by just grabbing some metrics and having you answer some questions? Well, the reason we're able to answer those questions is because we have an understanding of workload of the various positions. And if a practice is collecting, let's say, $130,000 a month with 2 full-time hygienists and 1 doctor, and the amount of patient flow it has in it, we understand the amount of work generated in every aspect of the business. And we can give you an idea of, yes, you have too few or too many staff. Again, this is something, if you understand the processes in your practice, you'd be able to think with this on your own. And this method of thinking, really understanding what's going on, applies to everything in your business, but it also applies to vendors. Let's say you hire a vendor to do new patient marketing. You should understand how what they're going to do works. You could say the same thing with an accountant, any vendor that you're dealing with. And this is where, for me, if I'm going to work with a vendor and, I don't understand their business completely, and I found that it's easier to just hire them and outsource the work to them, then there's a few things that I'm going to want to know. They have to be able to explain to me how long what it is they're going to do is going to take. What are they going to do and how long is it going to take and how much is it going to cost? And then what is the outcome that I can expect? And, if I have occasional questions, they have to be able to answer those questions for me. If they can't do those things for me, then I find a new vendor. Otherwise, I could be run around forever. So look, maybe this was not what you wanted to hear. Here I am telling you to dive more and more into your business and learn the ins and outs so that you know where every rivet in the ship of your business is, so to speak. And this is why companies like MGE exist. This is what we do: education and training on the subject of management, sales, communication, etc., versus just giving consulting and advice. Because if someone actually understands something, then they can think with it and they can perform in that area. And so while this isn't an easy thing to do necessarily, it's also not all that difficult. And most importantly, the more you understand, the more control you have over your business and destiny. This was a short episode, but I wanted to throw this out here because I wanted you to start thinking with this. I hope this helps. Again, we appreciate you listening and we love your feedback. And if you want any help with your practice or want to find out more about MGE, you can find us online at www.mgeonline.com or give us a call at 800-640-1140. That's all I have for you this week, folks. I'll see you next week.